The afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood. The sound of sneakers scraping against the concrete broke the stillness as a teenage boy hurried down the sidewalk. He wasn't running from anything, just heading home after basketball practice, tired but happy. He wore a worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder, his jersey sticking slightly to his back from sweat. His thoughts were simple: a cold drink, a shower, and maybe finishing the video game he had paused that morning. As he walked, a patrol car rolled slowly down the street. It was nothing unusual at first. Police cars passed through the area every day. But when the car slowed beside him and the officer's eyes followed his every move, a small knot formed in his stomach. He kept his head down, trying not to draw attention. He had learned from his mother's talks to always stay calm, to never give anyone a reason to misunderstand him. The car came to a stop. Two officers stepped out. One of them, tall with a firm voice, called out, "Hey you! Stop right there." The boy froze, confused. "Me?" he asked, pointing to himself. "Yeah, you. Come over here." He hesitated, unsure why he was being stopped. His heart began to beat faster. He had seen videos online, heard stories from friends, and listened to his mother's warnings about situations like this. Still, he told himself to stay calm. He walked slowly toward the officers, hands visible. "Where are you coming from?" the officer asked. "Basketball practice," he replied quietly. The second officer circled around, looking at his backpack. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir. Just a few blocks down. Mind showing us some ID?" He reached for his wallet, his hands trembling slightly. One wrong move, he knew, could be misunderstood. The officer's hand hovered near his holster, a sight that sent a chill through him. He took out his student ID carefully and handed it over. The officer studied it, then exchanged a look with his partner. "We got a call about a break-in nearby. You match the description." The boy frowned, confused. "I just came from the gym," he said softly. "Mind if we check your bag?" He swallowed hard. "I don't have anything. Just my stuff from school and basketball." "Open it up," the officer said. He unzipped the backpack slowly. Inside were only a pair of sneakers, a water bottle, and a towel. The taller officer poked through it anyway, as if expecting something else. "What's this?" he asked, holding up a metal keychain shaped like a whistle. "It's just a whistle, sir. Coach gave it to me." The officer didn't look convinced. "You out here alone?" "Yes, sir." "Funny, you seem nervous." He didn't know how to respond. His palms were sweating and his throat felt dry. I've never been stopped like this before," he said. The officer sighed and looked around. "You say you live nearby. We'll walk you home, just to make sure." He nodded, unsure if he even had a choice. They followed him down the street, their footsteps echoing behind him. Neighbors peered through their curtains, watching quietly. He could feel their eyes on him. The same look people gave when they weren't sure what was happening but wanted to know. When they turned the corner onto his street, he saw his house up ahead. Relief washed over him for a second. His mom's car was parked in the driveway. She was home early. He felt safer already. As they approached, the officers slowed. "This your place?" one asked. "Yes, sir." Before he could reach the porch, the front door opened. His mother stepped out, dressed in her work clothes, a badge clipped at her waist. Her calm but commanding voice filled the air. "What's going on here?" she asked, her tone steady. The officers froze for a moment. One of them straightened up, his earlier confidence fading. "Ma'am, we were just checking on your son." "There's been a report—" "I'm his mother," she interrupted. "And I'm also a federal agent." She held up her badge. The change in the officers' faces was instant. The taller one took a step back. "Oh, we didn't know, ma'am." "Clearly," she replied, her eyes sharp. "What's the reason for stopping a teenager walking home from practice?" The officer hesitated. "There was a report of someone matching his description near a burglary site." She folded her arms. "A vague description, I'm sure." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Did you call it in before stopping him?" The officer glanced at his partner. "We were following procedure." "Procedure," she repeated, her tone dry. "You stopped a kid, searched his bag, and escorted him home without probable cause. That's not procedure. That's profiling." The second officer opened his mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. "Don't," she said firmly. "You've already said enough." The boy stood silently beside her, eyes wide. He had never seen his mother like this before, calm but fierce, her presence commanding respect. The taller officer cleared his throat. "We didn't mean any harm, ma'am. Just doing our job." "Your job," she said, "is to protect and serve, not to intimidate innocent kids walking home." The officers looked uncomfortable now, shifting from foot to foot. The mother took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving theirs. "Next time, think before you act. Because not every mother can show up like I just did." There was silence for a moment. The taller officer nodded slightly. "Understood, ma'am." He turned to the boy. "Sorry for the misunderstanding." The boy didn't say anything. He just nodded, still processing everything. The officers walked back to their car, started it, and drove off without another word. His mother turned to him, her expression softening. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded again, though his heart was still racing. "Yeah, I think so," she sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I told you these things can happen. But I never thought it would happen right here." He looked at her, his voice small. "Why did they stop me, Mom?" "I didn't do anything." Her eyes filled with emotion. "I know, baby. Sometimes people see what they want to see. But you handled it the right way. I'm proud of you." They stood there for a moment in silence. The street was quiet again, the only sound coming from distant traffic. The boy took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. His mother opened the door and guided him inside. That night he sat in his room, staring at the whistle on his desk. It used to be a simple thing, a symbol of fun, of practice, of ordinary life. Now it reminded him of how quickly things could change. He could still see the look on the officers' faces when his mother appeared. Shock, guilt, maybe even fear, but also realization. Downstairs, his mother sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open. She was typing something, her jaw tight. She wasn't just going to let it slide. She knew too well what happened when silence followed injustice. The next morning, the neighborhood seemed different. People nodded to them with cautious smiles, pretending they hadn't seen what happened. But word had spread. The story had become the talk of the block, and for the boy, something inside had shifted too. The world had shown him a truth his mother had spent years preparing him for. But now he had seen it for himself. Still, he had also seen something else. That calm strength in his mother's eyes, the kind that could stop fear in its tracks. And even though the moment had shaken him, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone. The next morning started quietly, but the air in the house felt heavy. The boy sat at the kitchen table, his cereal untouched, staring out the window. The memory of the flashing lights, the firm voices, and the uneasy silence afterwards still echoed in his mind. His mother moved around the kitchen, trying to act normal, but he could tell she was thinking about it too. She finally sat across from him. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Not really," she sighed. "I know that was a lot yesterday. I wish I could have gotten there sooner." He looked down at his bowl, stirring it slowly. "Why did they look so scared when you showed your badge?" She smiled faintly, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Because they realized they made a mistake. And mistakes like that can have consequences." He nodded, still not fully understanding, but her calm voice helped. He always trusted her to know what to do. After breakfast, she picked up her phone. "I need to make a few calls before I go into the office," she said. "What happened yesterday shouldn't just disappear." He hesitated. "Are you going to get them in trouble?" She looked at him, her voice steady. "I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen to you or anyone else again." He didn't say anything more. Part of him wanted to forget the whole thing, to go back to normal. But another part, a deeper one, felt proud of his mother for standing up the way she did. Later that day at school, things felt different. A few classmates had heard about what happened. News travels fast in small neighborhoods. Some whispered as he walked by, others just looked at him with wide eyes. At lunch, one of his friends sat beside him. "Hey, I heard about yesterday." "You good?" "Yeah, I'm fine," he said quietly. "It was nothing." "Nothing? Man, people said cops stopped you right on your street." His friend replied. He shrugged, trying to brush it off. "It's over now." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't really over. The uneasy feeling lingered inside him, like a shadow that refused to fade. When he got home that afternoon, his mother was sitting in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table. Her work badge rested beside her notebook, and she looked deep in thought. She glanced up when he walked in. "How was school?" "Fine," he said. People were talking about what happened. "I figured they might." She set her pen down. "Listen, I spoke to the precinct captain this morning. He's looking into it. He sat down across from her. Will they get fired? I don't know, she admitted. But they'll be held accountable. That's what matters. He leaned back, thinking, You really think it'll change anything? She smiled gently. Change takes time. But it starts when people speak up. That evening, she made dinner like usual, but the conversation stayed serious. She told him stories from her own early days in law enforcement, the mistakes she saw, the unfair moments, the times she had to stand up for herself. People need to be reminded of fairness, she said, stirring the pot slowly. Especially when they forget what justice really means. He watched her, realizing how much strength it took for her to do her job every day. He had always known she worked hard, but now he saw the weight she carried. The next few days passed quietly. The officers didn't come back, but their visit had left an invisible mark on the neighborhood. Some neighbors walked up to them with sympathetic smiles. Others avoided eye contact. His mother stayed calm, polite and professional as always, but he could tell she noticed everything. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. When she opened it, a man in a suit stood outside. He introduced himself as a community liaison from the local police department. I wanted to personally apologize for what happened, he said, and to discuss how we can prevent it from happening again. She listened carefully, her expression unreadable. I appreciate that, she said, but an apology isn't enough. My son was scared to walk home. That shouldn't happen, the man nodded. You're right. We're planning some new community programs, training, outreach, youth safety initiatives. We'd like your input given your background. For the first time in days, her eyes softened. I'd be willing to help, she said. But it has to be more than talk. People need to see real action. After he left, she sat down beside her son. Looks like they're finally listening, she said. He smiled faintly. Because of you. Because of us, she corrected gently. You handled yourself with respect. That matters. That night, he thought about everything that had happened. The fear he felt. The pride in his mother's strength and the strange way people treated him afterward. He realized how fast life could change, how one moment could reveal truths you'd rather not see. But he also understood something his mother had tried to teach him for years. Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's standing still when your heart's racing. It's answering calmly when someone expects anger. Over the weekend, they attended a neighborhood meeting. The community center was full. Parents, teenagers, even police officers showed up. The tension in the room was thick at first, but when his mother stood to speak, the tone shifted. She didn't yell or accuse. She simply told their story. My son was walking home from practice, she began. He was stopped, questioned, and searched, all because he matched a description. That kind of mistake happens too often, but what we do next, that's what defines us. People listened. Some nodded, others looked down. One officer raised his hand. We're trying to do better, he said quietly. Sometimes fear clouds judgment. But we can learn. Her voice stayed calm. Learning starts with accountability and with empathy. When the meeting ended, several people came up to thank her. Some parents told her their own stories. A few officers shook her hand. The boy watched all of it, feeling something new, a mix of pride and hope. As they walked home that night, the streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk. The same path that once felt frightening now seemed different. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Mom, he said softly, you think people really change? She smiled, glancing up at the stars. Some do, some take longer. But every time someone speaks up, it helps a little. He nodded, letting her words sink in. I want to do that too someday. You already did, she said, by being brave when it mattered. They walked the rest of the way in quiet understanding. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something inside them had. The fear that once followed him home had turned into strength. And though the road ahead would still have its challenges, he knew now that standing up didn't always mean fighting. It could mean walking forward, calmly and proudly, no matter who was watching. Days passed, but the memory of that afternoon still lingered in the boy's mind like a shadow that wouldn't fade. He tried to go back to normal, school, practice, homework. But every time he saw a patrol car, something inside him tightened. It wasn't fear exactly. It was a mix of unease and awareness, a reminder that the world could change in seconds. His mother noticed the difference. She always noticed everything. One evening, while he sat on the couch pretending to scroll through his phone, She quietly took a seat beside him. "You've been quiet lately," she said gently. "I'm fine," he said without looking up. She waited a moment, then spoke again. "You're not fine. You're just trying to be strong. But it's okay to talk about it," he sighed. "I just keep thinking about that day. I did everything right and it still happened. What if you hadn't shown up when you did?" Her eyes softened. "I know that thought is hard. Believe me, I've asked myself the same thing." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound coming from the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, she said, "You know, when I first joined the bureau, people looked at me and didn't think I belonged. I had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. But every day I reminded myself why I was there, to make sure people like you are treated fairly." He looked at her, trying to picture her in that world of suits, agents, and long investigations. She always seemed fearless, but now he realized her strength came from experience, not from being untouched by fear. The next morning, his mother left early for work. He got ready for school like usual, but when he walked outside, a police car was parked at the corner. For a moment, his heart jumped, but then he saw who stepped out. It was the same community liaison who had visited their home earlier. The man waved. "Morning. Don't worry, I'm not here for anything bad," he said with a kind smile. "I wanted to let you know about something." The boy hesitated but walked over. "What is it?" "We're starting a youth outreach program at the community center," the man explained. "Your mom suggested it. We're inviting young people from the neighborhood to talk with officers, share ideas, and build trust. I think it'd be great if you came." The boy wasn't sure at first. The thought of being in a room with police officers made him uncomfortable. But his mom had helped make it happen, and that meant something. "I'll think about it," he said. "Good," the man replied with a nod. "We need more voices like yours." At dinner that night, he told his mother about the invitation. Her face lit up a little. "That's wonderful," she said. "You should go. It's a chance to be heard." "I don't know," he admitted. "It still feels weird." "I understand," she said softly. "But remember what we talked about. Change starts with small steps. You don't have to fix everything, just show up. Sometimes that's enough." So a few days later he did. The community center was full of people. Parents, students, officers in uniform, even teachers. The room buzzed with quiet curiosity and a bit of tension. Some people sat with folded arms. Others whispered among themselves. When the meeting began, the liaison from before introduced the idea. "We're here to rebuild trust," he said. "And that starts with honest conversations." One by one, people stood up to share their thoughts. Some talked about fear, others about respect. When it was the boy's turn, he hesitated, but the encouraging look from his mother, who had joined in the back of the room, gave him courage. He stood up slowly. "A few weeks ago, I was stopped by 2 officers on my way home," he began. "They thought I was someone else. I didn't do anything wrong, but I felt scared anyway. I thought about what my mom always told me, to stay calm, to be respectful, to keep my hands where they could see. And I did all of that, but it still didn't stop them from treating me like a suspect." The room was silent. Even the officers in the corner looked uneasy. He continued, his voice steady now. "When my mom showed up, everything changed. They suddenly listened, but she shouldn't have to flash her badge for me to be treated fairly." A few heads nodded. His words carried the quiet weight of truth. After the meeting, one of the officers approached him. He was an older man with kind eyes. "Thank you for sharing that," he said sincerely. "It's not easy to talk about, but we need to hear it." The boy nodded politely. "I just want things to be fair." "They should be," the officer replied. "And that starts with us." When they got home, his mother hugged him. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You spoke from the heart." He smiled a little. "I just said what was true." "That's exactly why it mattered," she replied. The following week, he noticed small changes. Patrol cars moved slower through the neighborhood, not in suspicion but in awareness. Officers waved instead of staring. At school, more students talked about fairness and safety. It wasn't a huge shift, but it was something. One evening, he found his mother sitting on the porch sipping tea and watching the sunset. "You think this will last?" he asked, sitting beside her. She smiled thoughtfully. "I think every moment like this leaves a mark. People remember it even if they don't say it out loud." He nodded, gazing down the quiet street. "I used to think people like us couldn't change anything." She glanced at him. "You changed something the moment you spoke up." Sometimes courage looks like a protest, but sometimes it's just a calm voice telling the truth. They sat in silence for a while, the sky turning shades of orange and purple. The boy felt lighter somehow, like the weight on his chest had eased. The world still had its problems, but for the first time since that day he felt a spark of hope. A few days later, he went to the gym early for practice. His coach greeted him with a smile. "Heard about what you did at that meeting," the coach said. "That took guts." The boy laughed softly. "I just talked." "Sometimes talking takes more courage than fighting," the coach said. "Remember that." On his way home that evening, the same street looked different to him. The shadows were still there, but they didn't feel so heavy anymore. He saw a police cruiser drive by, and this time, instead of turning away, he lifted his hand and waved. The officer nodded back. It wasn't a perfect world, but it was a start. When he got home, his mother was in the kitchen cooking dinner. The smell of spices filled the air. "You're home early," she said with a smile. "Practice ended soon," he replied. "Coach was talking about that meeting." "Oh yeah?" she asked. "He said it took guts." She grinned. "He's right." He leaned against the counter. "You think Dad would be proud?" Her eyes softened. "He would be very proud." They shared a quiet moment, remembering the man who had taught them both patience and strength. It had been years since he passed, but his lessons lived on in their everyday lives. That night, as the boy lay in bed, he thought about how far they had come. The fear had turned into a lesson. The mistake had turned into change. And his mother's courage had become a reminder of what real strength looked like. Before falling asleep, he whispered to himself, "Next time I'll be ready." He didn't mean ready for trouble. He meant ready to keep speaking up, ready to make a difference no matter how small. Because now he understood that the quietest voices could still echo the loudest when spoken with truth. The next morning began with a heavy silence in the house. The teen sat at the kitchen table, pushing his cereal around the bowl. The events of the previous day still replayed in his mind. The flashing lights, the shouts, the confusion, and then his mother stepping in with calm authority. It felt like something out of a dream, except every part of it was real. His mother watched him carefully as she made coffee. She noticed the stiffness in his shoulders, the way he avoided her eyes. She knew he was struggling, but she also knew he needed to talk about it when he was ready. For now, she just wanted to make the house feel safe again. "You don't have to go to school today if you don't feel up to it," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, I'm going. I don't want them to think I'm hiding." She gave a small nod of pride. He was trying to be strong, even when his heart was still racing inside. She walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder, just a quiet gesture of support. Later, as he walked to the bus stop, the neighborhood felt different. Some people looked at him with curiosity, some with sympathy, and others just turned away. He didn't know what they were thinking, but he felt the weight of their eyes. He wished they saw him for who he was, not just the kid from that police scene. At school, whispers followed him through the halls. A few friends came up to him asking questions he didn't want to answer. Some teachers gave him longer looks as if they wanted to say something but didn't know how. He tried to focus on his classes, but his mind kept drifting. Every sound in the hallway made him flinch just a little. During lunch, he sat by the window with one close friend who didn't push for details. They talked about music, about plans for the weekend, about anything but what happened. That simple conversation felt like a small breath of normalcy. Meanwhile, his mother was at her office talking with her supervisor at the FBI field division. They had reviewed the incident carefully. The local department had already reached out with apologies, but she knew there was more to it than just an apology. Mistakes like that couldn't just fade away. "You handled it well," her supervisor said. "You kept things from getting worse." She appreciated the words, but inside she was still unsettled. She thought about the officers who had drawn their weapons on her son. She didn't want revenge, but she wanted change. She wanted to make sure no other parent had to go through what she did. That evening, she sat down with her son in the living room. The TV was on, but the sound was low. She looked at him for a moment before speaking. "You know, what happened wasn't your fault," she began. He looked at her, his eyes serious. "But they looked at me like I did something wrong." "Sometimes people act out of fear or misunderstanding," she said. "That doesn't mean you did anything to deserve it. What matters is how you respond to it now." "How do I even do that?" he asked quietly. "By staying true to who you are," she said. By not letting this moment define you, there was a long pause. He looked down at his hands, thinking. Her words made sense, but the hurt still lingered. Over the next few days, the story started spreading on social media. Someone from the neighborhood had filmed part of the incident. The video showed the confusion, the shouting, and then the moment his mother arrived and calmly took control. People were sharing it everywhere. Some praised her for her professionalism and composure. Others questioned how something like that could happen in the first place. The attention was overwhelming. News vans appeared on the street. Reporters tried to get statements. The family stayed inside as much as possible, hoping it would all quiet down soon. But with every post, every comment, the story grew. One evening, while scrolling through the comments, the teen noticed something unexpected. Many people were writing messages of support. Strangers were sending kind words, sharing their own experiences, saying how much courage it took to stay calm in that moment. He showed a few to his mom. She smiled gently. "See? People can learn from this," she said. Sometimes even hard moments can help others understand. But not all comments were kind. Some were harsh, full of assumptions and anger. His mom advised him not to read too many of them. "Focus on what you can control," she said. "Don't let noise from outside steal your peace." A week later, the local police chief reached out to request a meeting. He wanted to apologize in person. She agreed, but only if her son felt comfortable joining. They both walked into the police station together, calm but firm. The chief greeted them respectfully. He looked genuinely troubled. "I want to say how deeply sorry we are for what happened," he said. "Our officers made assumptions they shouldn't have. It was wrong." Her son sat quietly listening. He didn't know what to say, so his mother spoke for both of them. "I appreciate your words," she said. "But what I hope to see is action, training, awareness, real understanding." The chief nodded. "That's exactly what we want too. We've already scheduled additional training sessions for the entire department. I also think it would be helpful for our officers to hear directly from community members." She agreed to help with that, not because she wanted praise or attention, but because she wanted progress. If this experience could lead to even one better decision in the future, it would mean something. After the meeting, they walked outside into the late afternoon light. The air felt lighter somehow. Her son took a deep breath. "I'm glad you said what you did," he told her. She smiled. "I'm proud of you for being there with me." As days turned into weeks, things began to settle. The story still floated around online, but people moved on to new topics. Life started to find its rhythm again. He went back to focusing on school, his friends, his hobbies. His mother returned to her work at the agency, though she often found herself thinking about how easily things could have gone differently. One afternoon, while she was finishing some reports at her desk, she received a letter. It was from one of the officers involved in the incident. He wrote about how that day had changed his perspective, how he had realized his biases, and how he had started taking more time to understand the people he interacted with. She read the letter slowly, then folded it with care. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave her a small sense of hope. Change, even slow change, was possible. That evening, she shared the letter with her son. He read it silently, then looked up with a small smile. "Maybe people really can change," he said. "They can," she replied. "But it starts with moments like this. Moments that make us all stop and think." That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about everything that had happened. He remembered the fear, the confusion, the relief when he saw his mother, and now the quiet strength that had come from it all. He realized that while the world could sometimes be unfair, there were also people willing to learn, to grow, and to make it better. He didn't feel like a victim anymore. He felt like someone who had been tested and had come out stronger. And as he drifted off to sleep, he felt grateful for his mother, for her courage, and for the lessons that had come from one of the hardest days of his life. Months had passed since that unforgettable day, but its memory never completely faded. The teen had gone back to his normal routine, school, friends, basketball after class, but something inside him had changed. He carried himself with a quiet confidence now, not arrogance, just a deeper understanding of who he was and how easily life could shift in a single moment. His mother noticed it too. She saw how he looked people in the eye more often now, how he took more interest in things happening around him. He had grown up faster than she would have liked. But he had grown stronger too. One evening, As the sun dipped low and painted the neighborhood in warm light, he sat on the porch steps while his mother worked in the garden. The sound of crickets mixed with the distant laughter of kids playing down the street. Everything seemed peaceful, but his thoughts were far away. He finally broke the silence. "Do you ever think about that day?" His mother looked up from the flowers, her hands resting on her knees. "Every now and then," she said softly. "Not because I want to relive it, but because it reminds me why I do what I do." He nodded. "It's weird. Sometimes I forget about it, and then something small reminds me. The sound of sirens or someone yelling, and it all comes back." She walked over and sat beside him. "That's normal," she said. "Something like that leaves a mark. But the important thing is how we move forward from it." He looked out at the street. "I guess moving forward means not being scared anymore," she smiled. "Or maybe it means being brave even when you are scared." That night, she got a call from the local community center. They were organizing a youth forum about trust between police and teenagers, and someone had suggested inviting her to speak. She hesitated for a moment, then agreed, on one condition, that her son could speak too if he wanted. When she told him, he looked surprised. "Me? What would I even say?" "Just tell the truth," she said. "That's all anyone needs to hear." A week later, they arrived at the center together. The room was filled with young people from different schools, local officers, teachers, and parents. The atmosphere was respectful but tense, like everyone was waiting to see how it would go. The moderator introduced them, sharing a brief version of what had happened months earlier. Then his mother stood and spoke first. She talked about her experiences as both a mother and an agent, about the thin line between fear and responsibility. Her voice was steady but full of emotion. When she finished, the room was silent. Then it was his turn. He walked to the microphone, his palms a little sweaty. He looked out at the crowd, some familiar faces, some not, and took a deep breath. "That day was scary," he began simply. "I thought I did something wrong when I hadn't. I didn't understand why things were happening the way they were. But what I remember most wasn't the shouting or the lights. It was the moment my mom showed up." He paused, glancing toward her. She gave him a small nod. "She didn't yell or argue," he continued. "She just showed them who she was. And everything changed. But it made me think, why did it take her showing a badge for them to see me as a person?" The audience was quiet. His words hung in the air, raw and real. He went on, "I'm not here to be angry. I just want things to be fair for everyone. I want people to take a second look before they judge. Because we're all just people trying to get home safe at the end of the day." When he finished, the room broke into applause. Not loud or chaotic, but heartfelt. Several officers nodded. A few even stood up to shake his hand afterward. It wasn't a speech filled with big words or fancy phrases, but it was honest, and that's what made it powerful. After the event, a young officer approached them. He looked nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "You made me think about things differently. I'm going to remember what you said." The teen smiled shyly. "Thanks," he replied. "That means a lot." As they drove home, his mother looked at him with quiet pride. "You did something important tonight," she said. "You gave people something to think about." He shrugged, smiling. "I just told the truth," she laughed softly. "That's the most powerful thing anyone can do." The following months brought more invitations to schools, to small community meetings, even a local radio show. They didn't seek attention, but people wanted to hear from them. Each time they focused on one message: understanding, not anger; awareness, not blame. Through it all, the teen learned to see his story not as a source of pain, but as a lesson, a reminder that even in moments of fear, empathy could create change. His mother saw it too. She noticed how other parents reached out to her, how teachers started conversations about fairness, and how even some officers admitted they had begun rethinking how they approached young people in their neighborhoods. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, his mother turned to him. "You know," she said, "when I first joined the agency, I thought change came from the top. But now I see it also comes from small moments, from stories like ours." He nodded. "Maybe that's how it really starts. One story at a time." Later that night, he sat at his desk, writing in a notebook. He wasn't sure if it was a journal or maybe the start of something else. A letter, a speech, maybe even a story for others to read one day. He wrote about fear, courage, and what it meant to be seen. He didn't write about anger because he had already let that go. Instead, he wrote about hope. He ended with a single line. Sometimes, the world needs to see your truth before it can change. He looked at the sentence for a long moment, then closed the notebook with a quiet sense of peace. The next morning, as they drove to school, the air was crisp, and the city felt alive again. His mother looked over at him, smiling. "Big day ahead?" she asked. He grinned. "Always." She reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "I'm proud of you. You know that, right?" "Yeah," he said. "I'm proud of you, too." They laughed, the sound light and easy, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt normal again. No cameras, no questions, no tension. Just a mother and her son moving forward together. As the car turned the corner, the sun broke through the clouds, flooding the street with golden light. He looked out the window, thinking about how far they had come. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was, they would face it with strength, with love, and with truth. And that truth, the one his mother had always carried with her, and the one he had now learned for himself, was simple: that understanding can turn fear into peace, and courage can turn a moment of pain into a lifetime of purpose. Their story wasn't about blame or confrontation. It was about resilience, unity, and the power of showing up with calm when the world expects anger. It was about seeing beyond the surface, finding strength in compassion, and believing that one moment, even one mistake, could spark something better. In the end, it wasn't the badges, the headlines, or the apologies that mattered most. It was the quiet promise they made to each other, to keep believing in people, to keep standing for what's right, and to never stop hoping for a world where every child could walk home without fear. That promise stayed with them, steady and unbroken, as life went on. And though the world kept moving, their story remained, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can leave the biggest mark of all.